setting the stage for your Georgia Saturday. This is DawgNation GameDay. Brought to you by Pella Windows and Doors, Kroger, R.S. Andrews, and Jittery Joe's Coffee. Now here's your host, Kaylee Mansell.
For one last time for the college football regular season, welcome into DawgNation GameDay. I am Kaylee Mansell with Jeff Sentell live from the field here at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where clean, old-fashioned hate is set to take place. I got a chance to walk through the outside, see tailgates. It seems like the hate is stronger than ever with the stakes coming into today's game, Jeff.
It might be some clean, old-fashioned, let's drink something to get warm, if that makes any sense. Chilly, old-fashioned hate might be a way to look at that. Obviously, Georgia Tech, we're inside Mercedes-Benz. We're expecting Georgia to come walking in behind us. There's no formal dog walk for today, but there will be the usual where Georgia walks in, Kirby Smart takes a lap and just kind of sizes up how much he wants to beat the Yellow Jackets by today.
Yeah, one of the few times that I am thrilled that we are in a climate-controlled situation. It is freezing outside, and it's also crazy to think that this could be one of the 3 times that Georgia plays in this stadium over the course of the next 2 months. But something we'll talk about with Rodrigo Blankenship that I want to get your opinion on is Georgia Tech sold their soul to play this game in this stadium for a big chunk of money. A lot of other teams would have taken that same opportunity as well. But do you feel like there is an advantage leaning on Georgia's side to play here, knowing the history of Georgia in Mercedes-Benz Stadium?
Yeah, Georgia plays here at least once every year. They've been to so many SECs. There's been some Chick-fil-A kickoff classic games. And let's face it, this is Georgia Tech. Kaylee, I don't have to remind DawgNation that Tech has done some nefarious things with their home game with Georgia. Some years they put the ticket in a 4-pack where Dog fans have to pay about $200, and they get the Wake Forest ticket or the Duke ticket or the NC State ticket and also the Georgia Tech ticket, and that one gets thrown away or dumped on StubHub or whatever. So Tech's always been trying to milk the Georgia fans, and like right now, Kaylee, we're looking at these lower level seats. I'm told face value of those is like $350, $360. So what Tech is doing is they're saying, hey, Georgia fans, we're going to use our home game to help add to our NIL coffers in the future. It was a $10 million price tag.
Well, of course, when it's a rivalry game like this, when we have to get nostalgic for a second, let's go ahead and take a look back on the series history between Georgia and Georgia Tech in the clean, old-fashioned hate rivalry. So when we look at the numbers, Georgia has the overall lead, 72-39-5 in the CKS era. Georgia 7-1 versus Georgia Tech. That only lost for Kirby in his very first year. Since the year 2000, Georgia is 20-4 versus Georgia Tech, and a Georgia win today would tie the series' longest win streak, which would be 8 wins. Georgia Tech currently holds that, so Georgia needs it to tie that streak today. Now, here's the thing. I'm going back and I'm looking through some of these numbers, and I do realize that in my lifetime, at least, I've been living in the good old days of Georgia and Georgia Tech. I don't know if you could necessarily say the same thing for you. So what is it about this Georgia team in this century that has had Tech's number?
Well, I think, Kaylee, most people forget that Tech used to be a part of the SEC way back when. Coach Bobby Dodd, they named a stadium after him. But, you know, the other thing that stands out, and we're not trying to be snarky here, Kaylee, but
we can't be, though.
I think if you're 70 years old, this is the good days for Georgia versus Georgia Tech. Coach Vince Dooley, the late, great Vince Dooley, made sure of that. And then Kirby, Mark Richt, Jim Donnan, Ray Goff, they all extended that. And really, since about the 50s or 60s, Kelly brings up a good point. This would be Georgia, with the win tonight, this would be Georgia's longest win streak in the series. It matches what Theron Sapp did, breaking the drought way back when in Tech's 8-year drought. And I guess the snarky is going to come out with me a little bit here, Kaylee.
I like it.
This might be the one thing that Tech has the advantage on in Georgia right now, and that is the longest win streak in the series.
So here in just a moment, we're going to tell you exactly why this is not your typical clean, old-fashioned hate. But before we do that, why don't we show you what we've got going on For the rest of the show, we'll take a look at some of the numbers that make this matchup special. Then, of course, we'll talk all things Tech, including Haynes King, Brent Key, what the strength is of this Georgia Tech team in my Mansell's matchup. Then, of course, we're going to bring on Rodrigo Blankenship, who's going to tell us if he has any good Kirby stories about Georgia Tech from his time on the team. I'm excited for that. And then, of course, we'll hit it up with our stats that would satisfy. And we're going to follow it up with a Sentell's intel behind the recruiting numbers. And yes, if you're joining us now, we are going to talk about the newest Jared Curtis prediction that came in from Steve Wiltfong this morning. Then we'll bring on our good friend Cody Chapins, who is working the camera for us today. He's going to be doing a live boots on the ground, talking through some of the things that we can't see that are going on behind us. Then we'll do our keys to the game. Then Connor Riley will join us from the press box to talk about injuries for today, and also, too, what's the expectation for Georgia's pass rush in a game like this. Then we'll end it all with a Cody Chapin's masterpiece hype video and our final thoughts on the game. But first, let's start with this particular clean, old-fashioned hate, because even though Georgia Tech has lost 2 of their last 3 games, I wouldn't say that the stakes have changed. It's really just been Georgia Tech's ranking this far. So when you look at the numbers coming into this matchup with both Georgia and Georgia Tech being ranked, it's the first time since 2014 both teams have been ranked. And I do want to say that this is maybe the first time ever, or one of the only few times, that both teams have a combined win total of 19 wins, which I don't think that Georgia's ever been the problem on that end. I think it's been more so Georgia Tech up until this point. But even though Georgia Tech may have fumbled the bag a little bit last week, it really doesn't change much. A statement win today for Georgia would be huge, and Georgia Tech is still a competitive team. And this is only the 12th time that both teams have been ranked nationally, Jeff.
So obviously, like, listen, I kind of noticed this, Kaylee. I want to know if your ears picked this up, but you remember how Brent Key was a lot of blustery about, hey, we're here to beat Georgia. We think every day about winning this game, winning the state championship. Kaylee, the stakes are that's really all Tech can win this season now. Reminder, this is a program that sometimes creates rings for wins over Georgia. Not ACC title wins, not Citrus Bowl wins, obviously not playoff bursts, but this absolutely means everything to Tech. You just watch these 2 teams the last few weeks. One team is getting better, one team is ascending, and the other team, they're kind of tailing off a little bit.
So before we get into the numbers behind Tech, we'll talk about Haynes King and Brent Key. One thing we'll also talk about with Rodrigo Blankenship, but I want to ask you is, so now obviously Tech ranked a lot lower than they were in the weeks prior, and the College Football Playoff Committee will be watching this game today. Does this have to be a statement win for Georgia, or do they just need to get out of this game with a win?
I think statement would probably still feel like, 14 to 20, 20 points. I think that would be enough. The one thing Georgia's got to watch is it's a measure of risk management, and that's how much do you need to step on the gas to beat Tech. I think Georgia wants to make some sort of showing on the scoreboard, because voters and people that are on the playoff committee are going to sit there and look at that as they weigh Georgia potentially. What happens if Texas A&M and Alabama both win? Does Georgia have a chance at holding off Texas Tech to get inside the 5, to get inside the top 4? There's a lot of talk about, does Georgia stay in the top 4? What happens in the SEC championship game? What happens with Texas Tech? And then everybody looks at the top 4 seed as the potential bye, and they also look at potentially having 5 weeks off before you play your playoff game.
Yeah, so as you guys just saw, Brent Key walking right behind us to the other side of the field. So with that, I think it's time to talk some Tech. Let's start with the guy who's the most important one on their team. Of course, that's their quarterback, Haynes King, who has been stellar for Georgia Tech this year. Clearly the better rushing quarterback in this game. I think that maybe Gunner has the edge in his arm. But look, second in the ACC for rushing yards per game. That's not amongst quarterbacks. That's amongst all players in the ACC. Also 15 rushing touchdowns, which leads the ACC, averaging a little over 250 pass yards per game. That's 5th in the ACC. Now, I will say where Gunner and him are very similar is they don't turn the ball over. Both have 4 interceptions on the year. This was clearly a really good transfer portal pickup for Georgia Tech, and I do believe that with Haynes King, they always have a chance, but to me, he is the most important playmaker for this Tech team.
The thing that jumps out to me there is, Kaylee, they're only the 12 passing TDs in 11 games, so that's only 1 per game, and I want you guys to imagine basically a sponge, because Tech has to squeeze everything they out of Haynes King when they play in a game like this. Now, we'll talk about a lot of the facts and figures later, but that usually means at least 15 carries, sometimes upwards of 20 carries, because they have to rely on Haynes King to get it done. That's their ultimate, that's their ultimate tip of the spear in a game like this. He threw for 300 and ran for 100 against Georgia last year, but it's one of those things, Kaylee. This is another time where they're going to have to go to the well with Haynes King to move the chains against Georgia. They don't have Mr. Singleton like they did last year to really cause Georgia a lot of problems. They don't have that threat in the passing game, but it's one of those things that the more you go to that well, the more likely Georgia can put some really big licks on Haynes King as well. They're going to have to expose him in order to move the ball.
Yeah, and I would say that the performance that Haynes King had last year in Georgia and Georgia Tech is what made Kirby Smart, who's actually walking in right now as we speak, say these things about Haynes King earlier this week in his press conference.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the numbers, right? Anytime you have a quarterback that has the experience he has, I don't know if he's played 5 years, 6 years, I don't know what it is, but he's extremely experienced, extremely tough. I don't think people understand how fast this guy is. He can run, and he was a great athlete in high school, track guy. The stories are all over of his success and his stories of where he's been and the injuries he's been through, and you see the hits he takes. He just gets stronger with each hit. So he's extremely valuable in terms of what they do and what they ask him to do. And he's hard to defend on all levels. Throwing the ball, people think, well, he doesn't throw the ball. He throws the ball really well, and he's really efficient. And they do a great job with the passing game, Buster does, because it's screen, RPOs, perimeter, and it's vertical.
All right, first off, let's give a shout-out to Kirby Smart and his glasses. I feel like we've seen them more over the last week. Walking in, looking studious, of course, playing a high academic school in Georgia Tech. But I think it's interesting, the comments about Haynes King, because we know this Georgia team studies film. They do a lot of prep work on the teams that they're going to play. But I think kind of headed into last year, at least from the Georgia fan base, nobody was really taking Tech all that seriously. And then when you see Haynes King play in person for the first time, it's easy to acknowledge that, man, this is a good quarterback that makes things happen. But I do believe, since it's their second time facing them, they're going to have a plan ready to go for Haynes King today.
Well, first of all, Kayla, I got to acknowledge one of your opening thoughts, and this is a seriously unbothered Kirby Smart to walk out here on Mercedes-Benz. There's cameras right in front of the tunnel that he comes out of, and he doesn't mind the readers. He doesn't mind the glasses. That means he is unfazed by what's about to happen. You see him kind of hanging out with his family a little bit there, getting some smiles. But Game Day Kirby and the readers, that must mean something serious. Kelly, I think Haynes King is a very special player. People forget that he was brought into Tech from Texas A&M.
Yep.
Another really good football program, and he has kind of been the face of things for Tech. And folks, you're going to see Tech play like this a lot because they got Aaron Philo behind him. And this is a guy that you talk about, what do you try to do? You try to take away what the other team does best. And what Tech does best is getting Haynes King loose, letting him move the chains, letting him kind of lean on a defense right here. And I think that's a challenge that Georgia's going to be up for today.
Yeah, and of course, all eyes right now on Andrew Smart, who's warming up. Of course, he's been a big part of Kirby's pregame routine. But now I want to focus on the leader of Georgia Tech, and of course, that's Brett Key. I think that's something that's really brought an extra element to this rivalry game, is knowing that both coaches not only went to these schools, but also participated in this game themselves. And now they did have some overlap while they were at their respective schools. Both of them were 3-1 against the other school in their time. Kirby 3-1 against Tech, Brett Key 3-1 against Georgia. But I think it just makes this rivalry all the more special, knowing that they understand the stakes that are involved in this game, the hatred that's involved in this game, and regardless of whatever the outcome, we're going to see an emotional response from one of these coaches.
I mean, you're going to see a really desperate, this is everything matchup right now for for Brent Key and Georgia Tech. And I mean, because honestly, Kaylee, they haven't played really well at all. Their defense has been kind of like a leaky faucet, to say the least, but maybe a leaky faucet on the Titanic. And this is a way to kind of restore a lot of the pride in their season right now. Kaylee, this is job carousel, coaching carousel season. It's one of those things where my expectation is, I thought, even though Brent Key is a Tech guy, Brent Key is basically bleeds the gold right now of Georgia Tech, the white and gold, but he's one of those guys that has done a really great job. He comes from the Nick Saban coaching tree as well, and he's one of those guys that you want to expect maybe some other schools to come calling for him because he's done that good a job rebuilding what Tech has.
And what's funny to me is we know that there's a history between both of these coaches. Both came from that Nick Saban circle of coaches, even though Brent Key came in as the offensive line coach the year after Kirby left. I think it's interesting how Kirby Smart likes to downplay that relationship with Brent Key. Here's Kirby earlier this week on their timeline of knowing each other.
Brent played at Georgia Tech when I played here, so I didn't know him personally. I knew of him, and then he got into the coaching profession, and he worked for a while with Coach O'Leary, and I think I didn't really meet him till he was down at UCF, and we had some common mutual friends in the coaching profession. A couple guys had passed through Alabama that had worked with him, and so I met him that way. But he does a tremendous job. Guys take on his personality traits in terms of how physical they play, and I'm sure they practice physical just like we do because you see it on tape.
Now, I don't think that these are two coaches that are texting on the regular, but I do think it's very evident that they have a lot of respect for each other. The way they run their programs is very similar. Go watch a Brent Key press conference if you have the opportunity. The language, the way that he coaches his team, the way that he speaks about them and their improvements sounds very much like Kirby Smart. I'm not sure if that's the Nick Saban style of coaching that they both picked up, but these are two guys who clearly lead their programs in very similar ways, and I think we see it in games like this when you see that physicality and the toughness on the field.
Kaylee, I think you're reading off the same script right there, because one of the things when people asked Brent Key about last year's game and the 8 overtimes, what have you, as you see the video of it right there on your screens, one of the things he's like is, nah, that was last year, different season, different team, has nothing to do with this current football team and the game that will be played. They're very much on message. Here's what I'll say, Kaylee, it's not happening all the time, but now you see Georgia Tech with in-state players becoming a hat on the table when a kid goes to Georgia. You know, used to be for years and years and years, I couldn't remember a true battle between Georgia and Georgia Tech ever in the Kirby Smart era for a player, and I don't know if that's even the case now, but at least Tech is getting into those top 5s and top 6s, which I think is one of the interesting things about that Brent Key has been able to do. They've been able to at least get a hat on the table, not a seat at the table, but a hat on the table with some of the state's top prospects.
I thought it was interesting that I don't feel like a lot of Tech fans were used to being in the position that they were this year, where they're at the top of the conference, consistently winning games, getting national recognition. And I thought it was funny that the reaction after Georgia Tech's loss last week is, okay, this is where we're comfortable. Georgia should be more scared of a Tech team that's got 2 losses with nothing to lose. Brent Key's going to throw everything he's got. And I mean, I think that Brent Key would have thrown everything at the wall anyway, because this game is so important to him. And also, too, I want to talk about last year, too. Do you think there is more motivation on Tech's side to win this game because of what happened last year with the 8 overtimes?
I don't think so. I think it's just Tech trying to show that they're not the little brother anymore. And the way little brother, or even the redheaded stepbrother or whatever. But Kaylee, this is what I want to put into perspective. This is everything for Georgia Tech. It would have been everything for them if they were 11-0 right now. But let's put this into, let's play a little quick speed round right here. I want to roll off some games this year Georgia's played, and I want you to tell me matter of factly, was that a tougher challenge? Was that more stressful? Was that more strained for the Dogs?
They're all probably going to be more stressful, but I'll tell you if it's tougher or not.
Okay, was going to Auburn and trying to beat Auburn in Auburn, do you feel like that was tougher than the challenge from Georgia Tech today?
I think that Georgia Tech is a tougher team, but Auburn is a tougher play. So I feel neutral about that.
So what about going to Tennessee and having to win in Tennessee?
I would say that was a tougher challenge than this.
What about simply going on the road and trying to beat Florida, new coach in Jacksonville, in a game that's 50-50 split down the middle?
I would say that this is tougher.
Keep going. Those weren't my best ammo. Trying to beat Ole Miss, an undefeated Ole Miss in Sanford
That
Stadium.
was most definitely tougher than this.
Yeah, you see where it kind of keeps going on. What about facing Texas in the same thing? A Texas team that has so much more horses. What I'm trying to say here, folks, is that Georgia has played about 5 games here where they're like, we've already done this.
Right.
We've already played this game where this is so seriously important for our season. It will have playoffs. It will have conference title game implications. Tech's just not used to being there. And mind you, I just rattled off a bunch of teams. I'm going to throw Florida in that because I feel they've got a better roster than Georgia Tech. Florida did beat Texas. Each one of those football teams are better than anybody that Georgia Tech has faced this year.
Yeah, and I think it's also kind of hard for us to judge that too because the ACC numbers are different than the SEC numbers. I mean, you can really put teams head-to-head in the SEC and know what they're capable of. One thing you're going to hear a lot about today is the matchups, the Kirby Smart versus Brent Key, Haynes King versus Gunnar Stockton. But I think when we're looking at position groups, the real battle today is going to take place between Georgia Tech's run game and Georgia's run defense. Because when you look at Georgia Tech statistically, they're technically the best rushing offense that Georgia has faced. Second in the ACC for rushing yards per game, tied for first in the ACC for rushing touchdowns, and then also first in the ACC for rushing plays of 20 yards or more. Now, Georgia, on the other hand, second in the SEC for rushing defense, 7th in the conference for rushing touchdowns allowed, and just allowed 5 rushing plays of 20 yards or more, which is first in the SEC. But what's even crazier, Jeff, Georgia is the only team in the entire country that has not allowed a rushing play of 30 yards or more. So even though statistically, yes, Tech will have been the best rushing team that Georgia has faced, I would go as far to say on the opposite end that this is the best run defense they have faced all year.
Definitely, Kaylee, and I like the way you dialed up your matchup there. Some really good numbers, but what's that saying? This ain't Kansas anymore. Well, Georgia's defense is not Kansas anymore for the Yellow Jackets. It's personnel, it's scheme, it's the grit, the way they play with. Kaylee, they've got to be able, Tech has got to be able to run the ball. I think they're going to lean a little bit too much on quarterback run game in order to do so. Where Georgia can really just be Georgia. When you look at some of the stats that we'll get into later in this game, I think Tech has got a heck of a chore ahead of them, just trying to keep Georgia's offense off the field, just trying to keep Georgia's playmakers off the field. And by the way, Georgia Tech has got to maintain the ball, possess the ball, kind of hog the ball against the best defense they've seen all season.
All right, so here's what we're going to do. In just a moment, we're going to bring on Rodrigo Blankenship. He's going to give us a Tech story or two, and then, of course, we'll talk about the other quarterback in this game. That's Gunnar Stockton. Really quick, though, want to give a shout-out to our friends at Jittery Joe's. Oh, my gosh, my Jittery Joe's K-Cup hit a little bit different this morning.
Oh, yeah.
I had to sleep in a tad, but also had to get my energy up for a game as big as this one. It's been voted the best coffee shop in Athens for 15 years running, and, of course, it's locally owned. And they're very excited to announce that Jittery Joe's has launched a franchise company with 30 years of experience in mastering the craft. They believe they can provide you and your community. The brand stands out in a crowded cookie-cutter coffee industry, which I'm telling you, I would love to see somebody open more franchises in Atlanta because I think the Atlanta coffee market is severely missing. So to find out more about franchising opportunities, make sure to visit jitteryjoes.com. And, of course, don't forget to download the Jittery Joe's app and get half off of your first drink. All right, I think it's been enough of us. I think it's time to bring in our good friend Rodrigo Blankenship, who's played in this game various times. I mean, Rodrigo, just kind of off the top, do you have any good stories of your time at Georgia versus Georgia Tech, or maybe a Kirby Smart Georgia Tech story?
I do have a story, and it kind of starts off on the wrong foot. My first year playing for the team in 2016, Georgia Tech came to Sanford Stadium and beat us. We were winning by 2 scores with, I think, about 6 to 7 minutes left in the game. And this is at a time when Georgia Tech was still running the triple option, very run heavy. And Georgia Tech just started airing it out and was able to get 2 scores late in the game to beat us at Sanford Stadium. And so that was not a great way to start off my time against Georgia Tech in this rivalry. But it led to the streak that Georgia is currently on, where we've won every year since then, starting in 2017 and going through last year in 2024. Georgia's won every game since then. And so I remember back to the first off season after that loss at the hands of Georgia Tech in 2016, going into spring football that next year, we started to introduce Georgia Tech preparation in spring practice. And, at the time, it was a little bit unheard of. At least for me, I'm like, what are we doing? We're getting ready for Georgia Tech right now. But I think that it just goes to show how serious this rivalry is, how serious the University of Georgia is about making sure that we defeat Georgia Tech every time we step on the field against them, that Coach Smart made it his mission to make sure that that would not happen again under his tenure to the best of his abilities. And so we started prepping for Georgia Tech towards the end of our spring practices in that next offseason in 2017. And I think that yielded pretty favorable results that next year. We went to Bobby Dodd, I believe it was. We went to Atlanta, beat Georgia Tech in their house, returned the favor, and we've won every game since then. So I thought that was a pretty cool story. It just goes to show the extents that Coach Smart is willing to go to make sure that he puts his team in a position to win, especially against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets.
Rodrigo, Hot Rod, man, much has been made of Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Georgia Tech selling its home game for, I believe, a $10 million price tag. What do you think about that? Is it a home game for Tech? What do you think?
I don't think it's going to be a home game for Tech. As we all know, Georgia fans travel with the best of them. And so I think this is, if anything, going to be a little bit more of a home game for the Dawgs, especially with the fact that Georgia has played in this stadium several times, playing in the SEC championship in recent years. A lot of these players, have already played in Mercedes-Benz Stadium at least once in their career. And so I think that a lot of the players that are, more experienced, more veteran players on this roster, they know what to expect from this stadium. They know what to expect as far as the noise, as far as landmarks on the field, all that kind of stuff, the little details that go into being able to make a place feel comfortable for you to play at your best. A lot of these Georgia players have that experience, and Georgia Tech does not. So I think that definitely plays into Georgia's favor, that a lot of these players, this is going to be a familiar sight and familiar sounds for a lot of these Dawgs. And Georgia Tech giving up their home field, it's a conscious decision. I mean, obviously, I think that it is going to benefit their program financially. As you said, there's going to be a lot of money involved in this decision, but I do think that it is going to play into Georgia's favor because the Dawg fans are going to travel really well, and these players know what to expect in this stadium.
As you can see, we've got Peyton Woodring warming up on the field right now, and I actually think that the kicker battle today is interesting because we know that Peyton Woodring's been a consistent force for Georgia since his freshman year, but Georgia Tech actually has a pretty good kicker this year too. 22 for 25 on field goals with an 88% success rate, and I would say that Peyton Woodring is probably the guy that can kick further, but he just hasn't had as many opportunities as the Georgia Tech kicker to make those field goals this year. So what do you think about the special teams battle in this game?
Yeah, special teams is going to be really interesting. As you pointed out, Aiden Burr for Georgia Tech has had a very solid season in his own right. He's a finalist for the Lou Groza Award for the best place kicker in the country. I may be a little bit biased, but I do think Peyton probably should have been, in that conversation as well. Peyton hasn't really had the volume to stack up with some of the other guys who are finalists this year, but that's, not necessarily within his control. That really just speaks to the fact that the Georgia offense has been really efficient this year, being able to produce a lot of touchdowns and not really giving Peyton all that many opportunities to kick field goals. But when we have needed him, he's been lights out. So Peyton's been having a great season. But as you said, Aiden Burr has also had a really solid season. Had the game winner 55-yarder against Clemson early in the season on kind of a fire drill, run on field goal at the buzzer, and that was a lot of excitement. And he was able to knock that through. So he has proved that he can be clutch. When the big moments arise, Aiden Burr has also been able to rise to the occasion. So this is going to be a case where the kicker battle is, could be very important, could be very significant in this game. And I think both guys are obviously very talented and very capable of coming through in the clutch if needed. Looking at other parts of special teams, I think that we're all waiting for the Georgia return game to really hit their stride. We've obviously got Zachariah Branch back there, who's a very exciting and dynamic player. And, he could be a difference maker for us in this game. I expect that the Georgia punt team, kickoff coverage team are also going to be very solid as they have been all season. So overall, I think that the special teams are going to tip a little bit in the favor of Georgia, but Tech obviously, especially with their field goal unit, is going to be capable of holding their own in this matchup.
And I want to ask you about the Georgia Tech defense because we spent so much time talking about Haynes King, the Georgia Tech run game. Just looking at some of the numbers, what do you make of this Georgia Tech defense? And And with that, what's the expectation of what the Georgia offense should be able to accomplish against them today?
Yeah, I mean, looking at this Georgia Tech defense and looking at, how they've played over the course of the season, it kind of felt like, they were a dam just waiting to burst, so to speak, where they've been kind of flirting with danger throughout most of the first 2/3 of their season, where their offense has really been the reason why they've been able to win some games, but their defense has been giving up points on a pretty consistent basis the entire season. And then we've finally seen in the last 3 weeks that dam has finally burst, the cracks started to show, and they eventually became insurmountable to the point where now, over the last 3 games, their defense is giving up over 41 points a game. And in doing so, their offense has not been able to compensate and overcome those deficiencies on defense, and they've picked up 2 losses in the last 3 weeks of the season. So, I think that there are some weaknesses in the defense that teams have been able to expose. One of them we'll touch on a little bit when we get to the big rocks a little bit later. But I do think that the Georgia offense is going to have opportunities to make plays. I think that as long as they, stick to their game plan, as long as they are well balanced, the opportunities are going to present themselves, and Georgia's offense should be able to have plenty of success in this game.
Rodrigo, what do you think? Obviously, it's the marquee thing that the TV broadcast really trumps up and highlights a little bit. But the quarterback battle today, the matchup between Haynes King and Gunnar Stockton, it feels like to me that Tech just has to use their dual threat quarterback a lot more. They have to go to the well a lot more. What do you think about the battle between these two quarterbacks today? Is it something as simple as the quarterback that has the bigger game is probably going to win tonight?
I don't necessarily think so, because I think that Georgia will be able to win in other ways outside of Gunnar playing well. I do think that Gunnar needs to play well for us to win, but I don't necessarily think that if Haynes King is to outduel him from a statistical standpoint, that's going to be the end-all, be-all. But obviously, both of these quarterbacks have been playing really well. Their numbers are incredibly similar as far as passing goes. Gunnar's got 2,465 passing yards on the season, and Haynes King is at 2,516. So they're within about 50 passing yards of each other. Gunnar's at 71.4% completions. Haynes King is 71.8% completion, so almost identical there. Gunnar's obviously got a few more touchdowns, 19 to his credit, and Haynes King only has 12. They've both got 4 interceptions, but they're both responsible for 27 total touchdowns on the season. So, these guys are almost mirror images of each other in a lot of ways with their output on the season. They've both been playing incredibly well. I expect that they're both going to play well in this game. I would love to see Gunnar take care of the football. As I mentioned at our post-game show last week, he's thrown 3 interceptions in the last 4 games. So don't really love to see that. So I hope that he's going to get back to making those really good decisions, being smart with the football, taking care of it, avoiding sacks, extending plays like we've seen him be capable of doing so many times this year. And then, really Gunnar's best attribute, I think, is just the intangible quality of he always rises to the occasion. When his number is called, whenever Georgia needs that timely play, that timely third down conversion, or that critical touchdown to get back in the game, Gunnar has always been able to deliver. So I think that if he's going to be capable of doing that again today, then I think we're going to be just fine. But like I said, I think there's other ways that Georgia can win. I think Georgia's got a great stable of running backs that's also going to allow us to have a lot of success. So I think if our running backs do well, if we do some other things right defensively and on special teams, Haynes King may still have a better statistical game than Gunnar, but I don't think that will be the end-all be-all, and I think that Georgia will still be capable of winning this game.
So we've got a plethora of guys that you can choose from behind us. We've already talked about who are the best players on this Georgia team so far, but when you look from the start of the season to now, the end of the regular season, who in your mind has been the most improved players for this Georgia team, both on offense and on defense?
Yeah, I've got a few here. I'm really glad we get to talk about this. I'm really glad we get to bring a little bit more positive spotlight and attention to some guys that really have earned it to this point in the season. So first one's going to be cheating a little bit, but I'm going to talk about the offensive line. I feel like the offensive line from the start of the season to now has been really good. I feel like they've made a lot of improvements. I think we saw a glimpse of it in the Tennessee game with their drive to open up the second half when they had whatever it was like a 12 or 14 play drive, and almost every single play on that drive was a running play, and Georgia just marched right down the field, punched it in, and that really, I think, kind of changed the momentum and changed the tide of the Tennessee game. And I think that was a glimpse into what this offensive line was going to be capable of this year. And now, to this point in the season, through 11 games, we've rushed for almost 2,100 yards as a team team that's over 190 rushing yards a game from 15 different ball carriers. It doesn't matter who's getting the football. This offensive line is making creases. They're moving the line of scrimmage and creating positive rushing plays for all of our ball carriers. So I think that the offensive line is the first one that I want to highlight, that they have made some significant improvements over the course of the season. Next up, I want to talk about Ellis Robinson, currently leading the team in interceptions. He was getting picked on a lot early in the season, whether it be the Tennessee game or the Alabama game. He was getting picked on a lot, going up against some of the best wide receivers that we've seen in the SEC. And I think that over the last few weeks, he's made a lot of improvements. As I said, now leading the team in interceptions. I think he's playing a lot more aggressively. Getting hands-on at the line of scrimmage has allowed him to have a lot more success and play a lot better. And we're going to need that to continue this week as well as with the rest of the season, whether that's going to be in the SEC Championship or the playoffs, whatever the case may be. We're going to need him to continue to elevate his play as he has to this point in the season. And then another guy that I want to touch on is Noah Thomas. He's got 4 touchdowns in the last 4 games. And Kaylee, I know this is something that we talked about earlier in the season, is when Colby Young went down with his injury, we were wondering who's going to be that next Georgia pass catcher to step up and become that number 2 option for Gunnar Stockton after Zachariah Branch, because we all know Branch is the main man. He's our main guy. And so we were always wondering who's going to be that next guy to step up, whether it be Lennon Humphreys, one of our tight ends, Dylan Bell. And I think that Noah Thomas has been that guy to rise to the occasion. As I said, 4 touchdowns in the last 4 games. He's become a great piece for our offense, whether we need a timely, explosive play or, just sure hands and then yards after the catch. He's been really good for us in the last 3 to 4 weeks. So Noah Thomas is really great. And then this one's going to be a little bit cheating because I know you mentioned players, but I wanted to shout out the Georgia coordinators, offensive coordinator Mike Bobo and Glenn Schumann. Over the last 5 weeks, the Georgia offense is averaging 35.6 points per game, which is a lot better than it was early in the season. So I want to give a shout out to Coach Bobo. I feel like he's done a great job game planning over the last 5 weeks and allowing this Georgia offense to really hit its stride at the right time. And then Coach Schumann as well on the defensive side. Over the last 4 games, his defense is giving up 13.5 points per game. If this defense is going to be able to continue to produce at that rate, continue to keep opponents out of the end zone, and just do some of the things that we've seen them do really well the last few weeks, like send extra rushers from the linebacker in the secondary level to create pressure and heat up the opposing team's quarterbacks. If they can continue to play at that level where our offense is averaging 35 a game and our defense is only giving up 13 a game, that's going to be a great recipe for success for whatever the rest of the season holds for this Georgia team.
Rodrigo, I want to speak kicker to you and the way that kickers can only talk to each other. Now, a lot of people will look at this game and think there's the potential that Georgia might not play the rest of this season, the regular season, or until the playoffs arrive, depending on what happens with Alabama, Auburn, and Texas A&M. What I mean by that, kind of in the vein where, is there a difference between splitting the uprights or doinking one in? What I mean by that is, does Georgia need a style points type victory day to impress the playoff committee? Because that might be the last thing evaluators can see before they decide whether they rank Georgia inside the top 4 or outside the top 4.
Yeah, I think that it's a great question. And the short answer is it depends, but the long answer is there is so much that's going to go into this decision. Obviously, style points would not hurt. I think that if Georgia is to win with style points today, win by 2 or 3 scores, that would obviously be a great boost to their resume, because after this week, Georgia Tech would probably not be ranked inside the College Football Playoff Committee's top 25. So as of this moment, it is a ranked opponent, but after this game, it may not be. And so then the committee, may not evaluate Georgia Tech as being the same caliber of team that they did, 3 or 4 weeks ago whenever Georgia Tech was still an undefeated team. So I do think that style points would help, but there are a lot of other factors that we have to look at that could decide Georgia's fate, whether they remain in the top 4 or not. One of them that you had mentioned, just a second ago and talked about earlier in the show as well is, what are the results of the other top teams in the SEC? We've got A&M and Alabama, who, as of right now, are slated to go to Atlanta and play in the SEC Championship. Now, if that holds true and Alabama and Texas A&M do play each other in the SEC Championship, if Alabama is to pull the upset, and Texas A&M is sitting at 3 right now, just ahead of Georgia, well, that opens up the door for the possibility that maybe Georgia stays in at the top 4, or maybe Alabama is then going to leap into the top 4, and bump Georgia out. So there is some variation with how the SEC championship game is going to play out. Obviously, if Georgia ends up in that game and they win, they're definitely in the top 4. If they go to the SEC championship game and don't win for some reason, then they're probably not going to be in the top 4, in which case they would probably slot into that 5 to 8 range, which I think based on the results we saw from last year's college football playoffs is really the place to be, is that 5 to 8 range, because then you play that first week, you get to kind of knock the rust off a week earlier than all the teams that are on the bye, and you get that first round game at home. So, that's something to consider. And then 2 other places that I want to look to see that could have implications on where Georgia gets seeded is with Texas Tech in the Big 12. If they are to rematch with BYU in the Big 12 championship and they avenge their loss to BYU from the regular season, well, the College Football Playoff Committee can look at Texas Tech and say, well, their resume, they beat everybody they played this year. They beat every team that they played on their schedule this year at some point or another. So if Texas Tech is to avenge that loss in the Big 12 championship, I could very realistically see a situation where the committee puts Texas Tech into the top 4, and that knocks Georgia out of the top 4, once again into that 5 to 8 range. And then the other place that I want to look is into the Big 10. Obviously, you've got the big game today with Ohio State and Michigan. If Michigan is to pull the upset, that could knock Ohio State out of the top 4 just like that. And then it may not matter whether Georgia wins with style points or not. They may be sitting pretty in that top 4 regardless. But if you have Ohio State win, they're playing Indiana, who in all likelihood will be in because they're playing Purdue this weekend, and that should be a win that will lock them up into the Big Ten championship. If you have a situation where you have Ohio State versus Indiana, and Ohio State just blows the doors off of Indiana in the Big Ten championship, that could knock Indiana out of the top 4, out of the top 5, 6, 7, whatever the case may be, because Indiana's strength of schedule is one of the worst of playoff contenders on this season. So if you have a situation where Ohio State just beats the brakes off of Indiana in the Big Ten championship, that could knock Indiana out, and that could also be a way that Georgia is able to stay in the top 4, whether this game is a blowout or not. So there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of different factors that we have to look at and consider that are all going to accumulate into the committee selection Sunday picks. But if Georgia is to get some style points today, that is going to go a really long way, and then Georgia is just going to have to wait and see what other results unfold across the country to determine whether or not they get to hold on to this current number 4 ranking that they have coming into this week.
All right, last thing, Rodrigo, walk us through your rocks for a rivalry weekend in college football.
Yeah, so my first rock is going to be Corral the King. As we talked about, already on the show, Haynes King has been really good for Georgia Tech this season. And what I mean by Corral the King is to try and keep him one-dimensional. As we know, when you play chess, the king can only move one space. And so he can't really move all that far on the board. And so that's what I want to do with Haynes King today, is make sure that he can't move around a lot with his legs, whether it's design quarterback runs or whether it's him improvising and scrambling, getting flushed out of the pocket. We need to minimize how much movement he has with his legs on the ground, just like the king can only move one space in chess. So if we can corral Haynes King, force him to beat us with his arm, make him one-dimensional, I think that will go a long way. Our second rock is going to be winning the turnover battle. Georgia Tech is one of the few teams that Georgia will play this year that has a worse turnover margin on the season than Georgia. They don't force a lot of turnovers, and they've put the ball on the ground quite a bit and lost most of them as well. So if Georgia is able to win the turnover battle today, create some extra possessions for this offense, I think that's going to go a long way towards victory for us today as well. And then my last thing is going to be balance through the ground game. So in Georgia Tech's throughout the season for Georgia Tech, in the games where they have given up the most points, which is to Pitt, Boston College, NC State, and Wake Forest, they have given up respectively 186, 175, 243, and 210 on the ground to the opposing team's offenses. So the teams that are able to run the ball the best against this Georgia Tech defense have the most success, scoring the most points, and pushing this Georgia Tech team the most that we have seen up to this point in the season. So I think if Georgia is able to have success on the ground, that will allow them to maintain balance with their offense and create, explosive pass play opportunities in the air. So that's what I mean by balance through the ground game. We have to get the ground game going early. That way our offense can be, multi-dimensional and be able to do a lot of creative things. Coach Bobo can really go into his bag, as we like to say, and get really creative throughout the game and create opportunities in the pass game. And a balanced offensive performance today will be a great indicator for success for us in this game.
All right, Rodrigo, we appreciate you so much for the tremendous insight you give us each and every week. We'll be excited to follow up with you at the DawgNation postgame show to see how those big rocks turned out. Definitely appreciate the chess reference there. So we want to thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the postgame show with Brandon Adams.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on again today, and go Dogs.
All right, so still to come, we're going to talk to Connor Riley here in just a moment. Also, our good friend Cody Chaffins has been behind the camera monitoring everything that's been going on behind us. We'll hear from him. We'll also do some Jared Curtis information as well. We're going to take a short break. This is DawgNation Game Day.
Nothing makes a house feel more like a home than quality windows. So trust the professionals at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll equip your home with energy-efficient windows and doors just right for you. Schedule your free in-home, no-pressure consultation. Get product samples, installation options, and a free quote. Log on to PellaGA.com and visit our new Experience Center in Duluth. Tell them Brandon Adams sent you. Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Hey, Dawg Nation. I'm Brandon Adams. If you love what Kaylee Mansell does here in our DawgNation GameDay pregame show, and I know you do, you'll also love our DawgNation postgame show. After every UGA home game, we're live at the UGA bookstore. And after every game, we're also available to you on the DawgNation video channels. We have video highlights, live calls, plenty of post-game reaction. Hopefully, talking about big Georgia wins each and every Saturday. The place to be after the game is on the DawgNation post-game show. We'll see you there after today's game.
This is DawgNation Game Day, brought to you by Pella Windows and Doors, Kroger, R.S. Andrews, and Jittery Joe's Coffee.
Welcome in, Dawg Nation. This is DawgNation Game Day. I'm Kaylee Mansell with Jeff Sentell. We are live on the field here at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We've got live footage of the team right behind us, and that team and what they've been capable of on offense and defense is what leads us to be very confident in our satisfying stats today. We'll kick it off with the offensive side of the ball. For me, and this one might be a stretch, I think I'd like to see a trick play from Georgia today. I know we saw the onside kick, but I'd like to see maybe a Dylan Bell touchdown pass, Gunnar Stockton receiving touchdown. I just feel like during rivalry week, the trickery means a little bit more. So for me, might be a little bit of a stretch. I thought it might come last week, but I think a trick play today would just put that extra added layer on the hurt when Georgia walks away with the win. And then I also want to see 250 passing yards. This is not a great Georgia Tech pass defense. I think where Gunnar Stockton has the clear advantage is with his arm, and I would take Georgia's wide receivers one-on-one with a Georgia Tech cornerback. So I'm going 250-plus passing yards for today. Jeff, what you got?
So, one of the things I did when I tried to evaluate Georgia Tech, Kaylee, is I was like, who have they really played in this ACC schedule?
They haven't.
They've played, Kaylee, 5 Power 4 teams with a winning record, and I believe 2 of them are 6-5, so they're really stretching it. Every one of those teams went off on the ground on Georgia Tech. I mean, even Boston College, who's not even included in that, went for 6.5 yards per carry. So the average in those 5 games, Tech gave up 881 rushing yards and 2.4 touchdowns per game. What that means simply, you don't have to, I'll break out the calculator for you. 175 yards per game is what those teams, who I believe in my heart of hearts can't run the ball like Georgia, they gashed them for that much. So if those guys are doing that, can't wait to see what the Dogs are going to do today.
Yeah, I think that Georgia has the running back edge tonight, even though Haynes King is the better runner for Tech. I think that Georgia's backs and Nate Frazier, Chauncey Bowens, a lot better than what Georgia Tech has. And as you can see on there, the 7+ catches for tight ends. I feel like in every single game that Georgia plays, no matter who's on the other side of the field, Georgia always has the advantage with the tight ends. And it seems like Oscar Delp, Lawson Lucky, even Elias Williams, who we just saw, they're playmakers for this team, and it's really hard to go up against that. So as many touches as the tight ends can get, I'm with that.
So, Kaylee, this is a good way to put this in point, and I was thinking about this when we were watching the Dogs warm up, and you mentioned Elias Williams, Kaylee. Elias is probably, if he plays for Georgia Tech, he's probably the second best player on their entire team. That's a guy that probably has 60 catches right now, 1,000 yards, lots of red zone touchdowns. And he's probably still the 3rd best tight end at Georgia. That's a good measuring stick to see how far these two teams are apart. Our good friend of all Dawg Nation coverage, Davin Bellamy, uses the term avatars to describe Georgia's tight ends. And Kaylee, maybe they can scheme up a way to get some attention on Noah Thomas and Dylan Bell and London Humphreys and Zachariah Branch. But once they do that, Kaylee, they have nobody that can deal with one of Georgia's tight ends. And that's why I think a big difference for tonight is if Georgia can get 7 catches into Todd Hartley's room, Tech's going to be in trouble.
All right, so now let's move on to the defensive side of the ball for Georgia. This is our satisfying stats. For me, it was 151 rushing yards or less. We've seen Georgia hold more competitive teams to this. And listen, this is what Georgia Tech does. I expect them to do it a lot today, but Georgia's run defense is unbelievable. So for me, I really think that's the key. And then also, too, just force 1 turnover. I know you'll talk about the turnover margins in that battle later on, but just steal a possession to get some momentum going your way, to get this crowd involved in the way that you can, knowing that Georgia's more than likely going to have the advantage in this room. A turnover would have this place going crazy. So for me, I want to see them hold the Jackets to 151 rushing yards or less and then force 1 turnover. Jeff, walk me through your satisfying stats.
Kaylee, so one of the things, Rodrigo's monologue spoke to my writer's heart a little bit. I think Georgia's going to play chess with Haynes King, and they got to keep him in check. And what I mean by that is they just squeeze all they can out of him. Kaylee, in those 5 games that Georgia Tech has played a Power 4 team with a winning record, he has had over 100 yards in 4 of those games. So what Georgia's got to do, and a lot of times he's thrown for 200 plus, they got to keep Haynes King in check. Don't let him run wild. Keep him under 100 yards. That's what I thought was very satisfying. And Kaylee, for my last one, I went back to last year's game. Georgia had 3 linebackers, Smile Munden, C.J. Allen, and Jalen Walker combined for 29 tackles. That was in 8 overtimes. Kaylee, none of those guys are here this afternoon for Georgia. So I really think Georgia's linebackers need to put together about 20 tackles to keep Haynes King in check.
All right, so now while I have you here, we've got some stuff that we have to talk about. We're going to talk about Jared Curtis here in a moment. But first, of course, some Sentell's intel with you. We're going to take a look behind the recruiting numbers for Georgia Tech. You can see that there is a very vast difference under Brett Key. When you look at 2025, 21st for their class rank, 32nd in the transfer portal for this year, 2024, 33rd overall, and then such a big jump. 2023, 61st, 2022, 54th. I mean, you can clearly see there is a difference in Georgia Tech recruiting under Brent Key. And one thing I think that he did a really good job of is changing up the strategy. There's so much high school talent here in the state of Georgia, and it feels like all of those guys were either going to Georgia or going to somewhere else. So what Brent Key did was say, hey, let's hire some of the best high school football coaches in the state of Georgia. That way they can focus on keeping these guys in state. I mean, the numbers don't lie, and I do feel like that's why we've seen Georgia Tech continue to get better under Key, because of what they're doing at the high school football level, and then, of course, making smart moves in the portal.
Yeah, they've hired a bunch of former Georgia high school coaches to be their director of player relations, recruiting relations there. And when you look at Tech, that was definitely an emphasis. They're actually recruiting better than like a Vanderbilt per se right now. So you see Tech trying to close the gap, Kaylee, but it is still a very, very, very big gap. Kaylee, the gap they're closing is not with Georgia. The gap they're closing is with the best teams in the ACC, the Clemsons, the Miamis, the Florida State. They kind of still got a ways to go to hang with Georgia on the recruiting trail. And, you know, Tech has opened up the money a little bit in terms of NIL with those in-state players. But, Kaylee, they're getting basically the players that would have gone to Auburn or maybe Kentucky or maybe to, maybe a Miami instead of Georgia Tech.
If we can, just for a moment, if we could bring that graphic back up, because there's something I want to show Jeff. Jeff, let's play a little game. Can you tell me who this player is on the screen right there?
It's probably got to be Tay Harris, right?
That is Tay Harris, who once a Georgia commit, ends up siding with Georgia Tech at the end of the cycle. Do you think we see Tay Harris today?
I think he's got one of the players they're going to lean on. Tay Harris is probably the only guy that can hang with Georgia's tight ends that we talked about earlier. And that's what I mean when I talk about Tech is really playing keep up with the top tier of the ACC, not Georgia. Because once Tay Harris decommitted from Georgia, he flipped to Clemson, and then Tech flipped him away from Clemson. He's one of those guys, one of the rare guys on the field, Kaylee, that could eventually play for Georgia that's on the Georgia Tech roster.
All right, so you brought up Vanderbilt earlier, so it means it's a good time to talk about this. You did touch on it this morning for DawgNation Daily, but Clark Lee signs an extension with Vanderbilt. As soon as that happens, Steve Wiltfong of On3/Rivals puts in his crystal ball for Jared Curtis to go to Vanderbilt, which was something that you and I had discussed on our Wednesday night show before the hedges, that the rumor was they were just kind of waiting to see what Clark Lee does. That crystal ball is in. Tom Loy had made one before based on pure speculation, but it looks like Wiltfong's really close to the situation. Now that we're getting closer and closer to signing day, Jared's going to wait till the last day. You said you were confident that he was still going to go to Georgia, but now that that crystal ball has been put in, does that change your opinion at all?
Kaylee, when I did the hit with Brandon this morning on my way in, I kind of thought to myself, I said, what do I wish I would have said additionally that I didn't say during the hit? And I knew I would have a chance to do this on the pregame. First of all, there's two really big things here. Number one, I think it's too early for this. I don't think we're there yet. There's why I say this. To the best of my knowledge, and I'm pretty well informed here, Jared Curtis has never said anything to anybody. He's never said anything to coaches at Georgia, coaches at Vanderbilt, the people in his circle, that he is going to flip to Vanderbilt. This would be shocking and stunning to the people that know him very well, that he is going to go to Vanderbilt. And the other thing is this, because I know a lot of Georgia fans are already talking themselves out of how much they wanted to see Jared Curtis in Athens. I want to just remind you guys this. Did you remember the Matt Stafford years in Athens? Do you feel like that was a pretty good thing that Matt Stafford was at the University of Georgia? Can you imagine a Matt Stafford-like football player playing inside Kirby Smart's program? I think that's still very significant here. And, one of those things you see there with Jared, me trying to be just not even a reporter or a recruiting guy or whatever, this I feel is terrible for Jared Curtis and his family, because this is a time of his life. He's trying to repeat as the state champion. He's trying to transition from high school to college, and he's at a school he was committed to twice, and now everything dominating their lives is will he or won't he flip to Vanderbilt, especially when this young man has said nothing. He's not came out and said anything that I'm going to flip to Vanderbilt. These are all sources, and these are all people on both sides of the aisle here thinking and projecting and seeing the way that the tea leaves are falling here about what is going to happen and what not has happened yet.
So could all of this just be shut down if Jared Curtis just came out and said, hey, I'm going to Georgia, and it's as simple as that?
It could be, or it could be a matter of, people wonder, like the hopeful Dog fans wonder, if he was just trying to do Clark Lee solid and get him an extension, which has happened today, or there's really a lot of smoke there. Kaylee, I think there's a lot of smoke here. It's an example of, I want to stress this. This is a young man that believes in his ability so much, he's ready to play right away, and he wants to play right now and not sit and watch and wait. But Kaylee, if we're being honest here among friends, he knew that Gunner was going to have the job in the 2026 season regardless when he recommitted to Georgia back in May. You and I were both there. I think about that day a little bit over the last week, Kaylee, when we were like, I basically said, man, are we done? Is this it? Are we through with all this? And he confidently reassured us that he was. But Kaylee, very much like back in the days of VCR that tells the correct time until the power goes off and then it blinks 12 o'clock back in the days. That tells you that the clock is right a lot of the times until it isn't. So you're going to watch, you're going to wait and see. One question I always had for folks with all this, Kaylee, is why is Jared Curtis the only quarterback that Vanderbilt is pursuing, allegedly, to replace Diego Pavia?
All right, so our good friend Cody Chapin's just spotted something that I feel like most Georgia fans want to get a glimpse of. C.J. Allen is warming up. Now, this is probably somebody that is going to be a game-time decision. Truthfully, I don't expect to see C.J. out there today, but the fact that he's warming up, I think that shows a lot of progress because we have been completely in the dark about his injury. And I'm not going to lie, at least from my end, I've been a little bit concerned because usually no news is good news, but no news on C.J. Allen. Typically you would want to hear something. So the fact that he's out there warming up, that shows me that he's further along than I thought. And with that, let's go ahead and bring in our good friend Connor Riley. Connor Riley, now seeing that C.J. Allen is out there warming up, is there a chance that he gets to play today? And if not, kind of who steps up in that role for him?
Yeah, just a few minutes ago, ESPN's Katie George, who has access to Georgia coaches with interviews and things that take place typically before the game, reports that C.J. Allen is expected to be able to play today. He had surgery on his meniscus 11 days ago. Jordan reports that Kirby Smart told us usually a 2-3 week injury, but C.J. Allen wanted to be back to play in this rivalry game. Remains to be seen of how big a role he plays today. I would still expect a healthy dose of Braylon Wilson, Chris Cole, and Justin Williams. It seems like Georgia's going to have their leading tackler and captain with C.J. Allen back ready to go against Georgia Tech today.
All right, Connor, and with that, I want to continue on with the defense. Specifically, the pass rush has been much improved since that Florida game. Now, this is not a Georgia Tech team that gives up a ton of sacks, first for sacks allowed in the ACC. So what's the expectation of what this Georgia pass rush could do today based on what we know about Georgia Tech's offensive line, but also the improvement that we've seen from Georgia's pass rush over the course of the last 3 games?
Yeah, I don't expect a ton of sacks from Georgia in this game because I think they know the most important thing is trying to keep Haynes King in that pocket, keep him from, ripping off big explosive runs. We know that the way Georgia chooses to get after opposing quarterbacks, they want to force them to beat them from the pocket. They had a lot of success against Arch Manning in doing that, and then when they were able to get up, that's when they were able to pin their ears back a little bit more. So I think against Haynes King today, first and foremost, you can't let him scramble for easy yards. He had over 100 rushing yards in this game last year against Georgia. And so I think your plan today is keep Haynes King in the pocket. And then as you're able to maybe build a little bit of a lead, that's when you start getting more aggressive and trying to take him down and create negative plays.
So in terms of the Georgia offense, I feel like the run game has really excelled this year, but at times we've seen a balanced Georgia offense going up against this Tech team today. Who are the bigger playmakers? Is it the running backs and Nate Frazier and Chauncey Bowens, or should Georgia lean more on their talented wide receivers like Zachariah Branch, Noah Thomas, London Humphreys, Dylan Bell?
I think this Tech defense is such a mess that simple first and foremost, I think Nate Frazier is someone you look to have a really big game today. We'll see if Chauncey Bowens is able to come back and what he might bring to this team in this rushing attack. But you saw what Nate Frazier can do. I think he's shown consistently he can get to that 60, 70-yard mark. The big thing is, can he break those long runs? And if he's able to do that like he was against Mississippi State, I think that changes the way that Georgia's able to play. Because importantly, I think if they're able to run the ball, that keeps the Tech offense off the field, which is their best chance at winning this game. That's something they could not do against Georgia Tech a year ago. So I think the running game in particular today, I'll be interested in seeing how often they run Gunnar Stockton, especially where there's a world where they don't have a game next week or even a few weeks after that, depending on how things shake out. So I think today the running game in particular is going to be very important for Georgia, especially in terms of keeping that Georgia Tech offense off the field.
Well, the person who's going to be in charge of making those decisions is none other than Georgia's offensive coordinator, Mike Bobo. We kind of touched on this on our Thursday night show, DawgNation at Large, that actually took place on Wednesday this week because of Thanksgiving. Last year it was Buster Faulkner who absolutely got in his bag for this game. I think that Georgia fans are hoping Mike Bobo will be on that side today. So what do you make of the battle between the offensive coordinators in this game who are very familiar with one another?
Yeah, these guys are both analysts on the 2022 Georgia staff. And ultimately, they're not going against one another. But I think that Buster Faulkner has to have a really great day today if Tech's going to have a chance. If you're Mike Bobo, I think you come out and attack early. If you're able to put Tech in a hole and really make Georgia Tech one-dimensional like we saw against Pittsburgh last week, that makes Buster Faulkner's job much tougher. So, we've talked about it a lot this season. We've seen them do a good job of it of late. Playing well and starting well in the first half. That's something Georgia didn't do last year against Georgia Tech, falling behind 17-0 in the first half. You need to get a couple scores on the board to really, I think, put pressure on Georgia Tech and force them in a way to play one-handed.
And, of course, we've got a good shot of Buster Faulkner, whose son, by the way, will be playing in the GHSA state playoffs tonight for North Oconee. But to wrap things up, Connor, it's rivalry week. I know you got to have a good one. Give me a stat of the day.
Yeah, so Georgia right now has won 7 straight games against Georgia Tech. If they win today, they would get 8 straight wins, tying the longest winning streak in this rivalry. Of note also, The biggest margin of victory in this series is 48-0. That came by Georgia Tech in 1943.
All right, thanks, Connor. We appreciate you.
Yes.
I had to let him get off the Zoom because I couldn't break his heart and let him know that we've already covered both of his stats of the day. So hopefully amongst all of us Dawg Nation fans, we can just kind of keep that a secret from Connor. Now, really quick, we've got more live footage. We're going to talk to Cody Chaffins here in just a second. As I mentioned, every Thursday night you can watch me and Connor on Dawg Nation at Large. This week is another big week for us here at Dawg Nation, not just because there's the potential that Georgia can play in the SEC Championship, but also because this week is signing day. Now, Jared Curtis not going to sign until Friday, but the early signing period starts on Wednesday night. We're going to be doing double coverage that day. Of course, we'll have myself, Jeff Sentell, Braden Adams in the afternoon to hopefully talk to some of Georgia's newest signees, and then we'll do a Before the Hedges episode that night where we break down every single player who's putting pen to paper that day. And then all of our signing day coverage is brought to you by Kroger. Black Friday starts today. Don't forget about our friends at Kroger who can help you out with kitchen appliances or Rubbermaid storage. I know I need some new Tupperware for my house and more. So if you go ahead and download the app, you can get digital coupons to start saving today. I know a lot of places go through Cyber Monday as well. So after the game is over, make sure to check out our friends at Kroger for a great Black Friday sale. All right, so we've kind of had a moment to let things happen behind us, so I want to bring in our friend Cody Chaffins to talk about what he's seen. He's really watching the Georgia Tech guys now, but we've watched some amazing things happen while video coverage has been going on. Saw Ellis Robinson make a tremendous one-handed catch. Jaden Riddell looks like he might be the most muscular guy on this team. Cody, from your perspective, can you just walk us through some of the things that you've seen that have taken place behind us this far?
So we're looking at Rylan Godey, former Georgia tight end, talking to Todd Hartley, his former tight ends coach. Godey, of course, on staff now at Georgia Tech, so very strange to see him on the other side. The other thing that everybody's talking about, and what we will be talking about, is there is C.J. Allen warming up. You talked about, weren't sure what his status was. That is his status. Y'all are seeing it live. This is what nobody else is bringing to you right now. We are bringing this to you. C.J. Allen warming up. Will he play today? Will the Dogs need him? Those are questions I can't answer right now. I would hope not, but with Haynes King out there, you feel much better having number 3 moving the way he is moving right now with a knee injury he had been suffering with out on the field. So there is a live update as you can get, is C.J. Allen out there warming up. Some other things we've seen, we got the outside linebackers warming up on this side. This is kind of their typical stuff. You can see, though, Zayden Walker is warming up with the outside linebackers. It's something we saw Jalen Walker do last year. He went and did, so Zayden just walked over from the middle linebacker drills where C.J. Allen was. He's now warming up with the edge rushers. So Zayden Walker, 5-star freshman, doing his thing on the edge. He's been a spark plug for this Georgia pass rush over the last couple of games, and there you see him warming up. He's already done his middle linebacker warm-up, and Chris Cole does the same thing, number 9, right in your screen. Both of those guys warm up with both sets of linebackers so they can be ready to rush the passer.
All right, so we just got a good look at Chris Cole, but I want to talk about Zayden Walker. Walked over from the middle linebackers, now working with the outside linebackers. What have you made of his development and his performance over the last 2 weeks?
So, Kaylee, he can basically do both. He's an expert at everything that Georgia wants to do. Probably, Kaylee, I would say, out of all the guys on the Georgia team, he's in the top 2 or 3 guys in terms of explosive, twitch, ball get off, and much as the way Georgia developed Jalen Walker into a pass rush dynamo, even though he was signed and played a lot of inside backer inside the box, Zayden Walker is special coming off the edge. And Kaylee, I remember when that man walking by right there, Raylan Wilson told me after a game, hey man, just watch, just wait on Zayden Walker because he's going to be special rushing the passer for us this year, not next year.
And also on top of that too, just Chris Cole. I know that you had mentioned whenever he was a senior in high school and he was just committed to Georgia, very high academic, high IQ kid. I mean, he is really starting to adjust himself into the speed of the game so quickly. We saw glimpses of it last year, but he has become one of the more reliable players for this Georgia team. Now also the sack leader of the Dogs too.
Yeah, Kaylee, it's almost unfair what Georgia has at the linebacker position when you can roll through guys like Zayden Walker, Chris Cole, C.J. Allen, Raylan Wilson, Justin Williams in terms of the depth Georgia has right there. Kaylee, every time I see Chris Cole, he looks like an action figure walking. He looks like an Avenger or a mutant. That guy right there is a future first-round pick. The world's just going to see that in at least one more year because checks every box. And, Kaylee coming into the frame right there. That's the #1 player in the country in the 2024 class at linebacker. That's also part of that room in Athens. You want to talk how you keep Haynes King in check? You do it with backers like that.
All right, so while we've got the guys on the field, real quick, why don't we go ahead and do our keys to the game. This is Kaylee's keys. So, of course, we're going to keep this live shot up for you guys. For me, the key was very simple today. We'll do Jeff's here in just a moment. We can go ahead and put mine on the screen if you don't mind. All right, look, I think the key is to get ahead early and stay ahead. Georgia Tech so far this year has had 4 fourth-quarter comebacks. We've seen Georgia in many of those scenarios where they've been the team to come back. Georgia Tech has done that as well. I think you have to force them to the one thing that they're not as good at, and that's the pass game. If Georgia gets up really early in the second half, Georgia Tech's not going to have time to run the ball because you need as much time of possession as you can get. So I like Georgia to stay ahead early. And also, too, I feel like one thing that we've really started to recognize from Kirby Smart this year is the analytics, the clock management, the 2-minute drills. Him being the best coach in college football also comes down to the little things like that. So when Georgia gets ahead early, stays ahead, they're controlling the clock, it gives CKS a little bit more options and creativity to run the clock the way that he wants to. So for me, you can't let the Jackets stay in it too long. We know that they're capable of overcoming large deficits, but I think if Georgia can make a first half statement, then Georgia controls the clock for the rest of the game.
Kaylee, one of the things that you're talking about with your keys right there is, for me, here's a bonus key that just comes to my mind right now watching these two teams warm up. You remember how in the Georgia game with Texas, Georgia was very aggressive with the onside kicks and trying to steal possessions and tricks? I'd look for Georgia Tech to be very aggressive against Georgia today, trying to pull out all the stops and everything else like that. But the other thing, Kaylee, one of my big keys coming in is I looked this up, Kaylee, this week, and Georgia, even though they don't turn the ball over and they do very few things wrong, is only -1 on the season in turnover margin. And that's what Georgia needs to do, Kaylee. For this to happen, I think Georgia needs to be -2. For Tech to have a shot, Georgia has to be -2 in turnover margin. That would give Tech more bites out of the apple, more chances to try and make up some ground against Georgia.
Yeah, I like this one too because even though we talked about it earlier, Haynes King hasn't thrown that many interceptions, very similar to Gunnar Stockton in that regard. This is a Georgia Tech team that has seen a lot of fumbles this year. We've seen Georgia recover some fumbles on the year. If Georgia can prevent a turnover on their end and maybe force one on the Georgia Tech side, I mean, that could be the key into getting up early and staying ahead.
Mike, one of the things, Kaylee, that Mike told us this week when he spoke to Pitt's Pat Narduzzi is they wanted to make Tech one-dimensional. And once they got up early on Tech and made Haynes King throw the ball, well, you really throttle down the threat level of their offense when you do that.
It's so funny because right here we see Jesse Palmer talking to Glenn Schumann, and I remember, was it Jesse Palmer that said that the third down defense was the same every time or boring? I wonder if Glenn's trying to explain himself or maybe Jesse's apologizing. Like, I really would love to be a fly on the wall for this conversation right now.
I think they're basically talking about their shoes, perhaps, or a game way back in somebody's career. But, good on Jesse to come over there and act like he's basically on a show with The Bachelor and talk to Glenn Schumann about what he was thinking earlier this year.
Maybe he's asking if Glenn Schumann wants to be The Bachelor because next season is Bachelorette. After that, it's Bachelor. I wonder if he's trying to give Glenn Schumann his rose.
I mean, what Glenn's going to do. Glenn is so highly analytical. I think this is a good shot from Cody Chaffins here because what what Glenn Schumann does is everybody calls him like Rain Man when it comes to linebackers. And look at Glenn. What does body
Glenn's
language
trying to
say?
get out of this conversation right now, and
like,
Jesse keeps pulling him back.
Jesse's like, let me make these points. Let me talk with my hands. But he really wants to know about C.J. Allen and what that means. Meanwhile, Glenn Schumann's like, man, I got some COFH, some clean old-fashioned hate to get to, much as I'd love to talk ball. Because Glenn Schumann really loves to talk ball. This is a little interesting pregame.
No, I mean, I'm sure he does love to talk ball, but not 61 minutes before kickoff when they're playing in a rivalry game. It even looked like Jesse Palmer kind of went in to give him the dap up, and maybe Glenn was like, no, but you could tell he was trying to get out of that conversation for a while. So, I mean, I love me some Jesse Palmer. I'm not afraid to say that, but man, go up to the booth and let Glenn do his job.
Maybe if we're reading body language 101 or 102 right here, Kaylee, maybe Glenn just knows that above all things that Jesse Palmer is a Gator, and Gators and Dogs can't stay together that long. The other thing is this, I bet Jesse's just being a broadcaster, and he's like, okay, what's really happening with CJ? What does that mean if he's in the game, if he's outside of the game? You know, they have these production meetings with coordinators. I bet, and there's the handshake right there. I bet they've already talked about some of those things in the pregame production meetings as well. But, you know, Kaylee, one of these things, it's great to see CJ back. It's great to see him working. But this could very well be a case that they're just trying to get him ready in case something happens with an injury with their top 3 or 4 linebackers there.
All right, there are some people who wanted me to ask you if you are okay with that cough. Nothing to be concerned about, right?
Nothing to be concerned about at all.
All right, so it looks like some of the Georgia players, they've switched the other side of the field. We haven't really had the chance to talk about Gunnar Stockton all that much. You can kind of see him down there warming up with the other quarterbacks. I mean, just, you knew Gunnar in high school. To see him playing his best at the end of the season, I just feel like Georgia always has a chance to have the comeback or put themselves in situations to be successful with the way that Gunnar Stockton is playing right now. And you told people all along, you have to be patient with Gunnar. And now that we're at the end of the regular season, that patience was really all that anybody needed, because, wow, he is playing at his best in these moments.
You know, Kaylee, we did a Dog Nation huddle before the game where we asked the entire Dog Nation staff before this season, we asked what kind of touchdowns, what sort of expectations do you have for Gunnar Stockton this year? And most people settled around 20, 22, 25 touchdowns. Kaylee, he's still at the tail end of the regular season. I bet he goes over 30 touchdowns on the season, either running or throwing in terms of total touchdown responsibility. And I will add about that cough, Kaylee, that was one of the things when we were waiting today in line in the frigid Atlanta temps for about 40 minutes to come into the building. That probably sparked a little bit of this cough I got going on right now.
Yeah, if you are not in the stadium today, I hope that you are watching it in a warm place, because that wind outside will get you today. But also, too, you know, I like a cold weather game, I like a warm weather game, but also playing in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, it's an equalizer. You know, when it rains outside, it can be an equalizer for teams, but there's no excuses in this game. It is as good as it gets. And we just saw Buster Faulkner talking to 2 Georgia staffers, maybe laughing it up with them. He's got to get his game face on.
He does. And, you know, there is a lot of chippiness there about, hey, Buster Faulkner being the golden boy, the whiz play caller that has the answers for Georgia. These guys are all competitors, Kaylee, and I bet Georgia would like to show defensively, scheme-wise, athletes-wise, that, you know, what happened last year in Athens was an aberration in terms of all those yards. Kaylee, one thing, we like to bring people here down on the field and tell them what it's really like. This is a $1 billion facility. It's hosted national championship games and Super Bowls. It is the weirdest thing, like Grandma's house. If somebody leaves a window or a door open at one of these openings, you can really feel the cold air coming through one of the concourses, through one of the tunnels. I can't believe there was some speculation earlier in the week that they might have the roof open for this game, which would have been crazy to talk about. Kelly, when I got here this morning, the photographers were talking about that.
Oh, okay. Look, we've got a meeting of the offensive minds. Got Buster Faulkner talking to Mike Bobo, and on top of that, former Kennesaw State head coach who is now with Georgia Tech, Brian Bohannon. I mean, those conversations, I mean, you clearly can't be talking about the game. Something tells me that they might be talking about the Georgia high school football playoffs tonight.
Kaylee, they might be talking about Gainesville High, but They're probably talking about Panama City back in 1993 or 1994.
Club La Vila has definitely been brought up in that conversation.
Spinnaker, maybe the Foreigner concert, because Bohannon and Bobo were running boys a little bit at the same time in Athens when they were both together as guys at Georgia. They go back a very long ways. There's a lot of offensive ball and a lot of memories between those three.
Yeah, I mean, just look at Bobo, the hand motions. That's how you know you're telling a good story, when you're like having to use your hands to tell the full story. So maybe reminiscing on the glory days. Also got to give a shout out to Brian Bohannon, who was the Kennesaw State head football coach when I was there. Obviously not there anymore. He is with Georgia Tech, so you can see them, but also too, right in front of us, it's the special teams guys, Gunnar Stockton, right there with them. We talked a little bit about Peyton Wintering. And, you know, in that Texas game, maybe we saw Brett Thorson struggle a little bit. Didn't really get to punt much last game. I mean, what do you make of Brett Thorson's performance in his final year with the Dogs?
Well, I think Brett's kind of had a year where you wondered if he even started the year healthy. He was coming over an off-season injury, getting back, getting right. Kaylee, I think this is one of those games where Brett Thorson puts out some really good NFL tape right there for him, because it's an NFL stadium. The conditions are controlled. And I think one of the many things that separate these two teams are special teams. Remember Thorson and then Georgia's long snapper Chase Gardner, you see him right there, and also Peyton Woodring. Those guys were all preseason first team all SEC. And one thing you can count on with Georgia is to always have elite special teams play in that third phase. One other thing you were mentioning that went through my mind when we were looking at Bohannon and Faulkner. Shout out to Mike Bobo, who's maybe under a little bit of stress right now with what's going on the recruiting trail with Jerry Curtis, but Bobo has found a way within 1 year to have his stock among Georgia fans higher than
crazy.
Buster Faulkner. Everybody is always chirping about Buster needs to come back. Buster needs to come to Georgia. Right now, the Q rating for Mike Bobo is even a lot higher than Buster Faulkner.
Connor Riley and I talked about this on Thursday night, actually. Like, I remember thinking back to post-Georgia Tech game, and everybody was like, well, why isn't Buster Faulkner the offensive coordinator for the Dogs? But there has been no bigger surprise this year than what Mike Bobo has been able to do with this Georgia offense, with a quarterback that he trusts. Also have to give them credit for bringing in talent around Gunner with guys like Zachariah Branch, Noah Thomas, the development of Chauncey Bowens, Nate Frazier playing at his best right now. But some people are always going to be set in their ways with how they feel about Mike Bobo. But for those whose votes are for sale, I feel like everybody's favoring him now. He knows this offense really well. It's clear that there's a trust within them. He knows what their strengths are, and it really hasn't been the Georgia offense that's been a huge issue throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, one of those things we wrote about this week about Gunnar Stockton on DawgNation.com, Kaylee, was, you know, what Gunnar and his family are going through with all these games. And his father, Rob Stockton, told me they never knew how cool it was to be the backup quarterback's parents until they became the starting quarterback's parents. And I thought it was really cool how Rob Stockton shared a story with me about every time Georgia goes on offense this year, what he does is he puts his earbuds in and he plays a playlist called UGA 14. And there's one song on that playlist, and it's called Thank You, Lord by Thomas Rhett. And that's one of the things Rob Stockton, his dad, does. He blocks out all the outside noise, and all he hears is that song on loop whenever Georgia is on offense and Gunnar is running the show. And Kaylee, the Bobo family and the Stockton family go way back. George Bobo, Mike Bobo's father, was Gunnar's quarterback coach, having him at the school at 6:30 on school mornings, throwing around when he was 6 years old. So the Bobos have known what Gunnar Stockton is all about for quite some time, and they're seeing all their hopes and all the potential realized. And still, Kaylee, his first season as the Georgia starter.
All right, so as we begin to wrap up, it's time to get excited for clean, old-fashioned hate. 8 overtime memories, a first battle at the Benz, a pair of tough quarterbacks. Georgia and Georgia Tech in 2025 has a little bit of everything.
It was an intense game. There was a lot of back and forth.
What a night between the hedges. A comeback for the age. An overtime that tested all the metal Georgia had.
My first time playing there was last year. I just remember the Dawg fans just being so loud, and it was a great experience. I love playing in the stadium.
Almost like a home game feeling, and how you're just familiar with the stadium, and obviously the SEC championship. I mean, you can't really pass that one up when I'm thinking about past games. And then actually my first game with Georgia, we played there as well against Clemson. So those were both really cool memories.
I know Haynes, he's a tough dude.
He's extremely experienced, extremely tough. That's been similar for Gunner. He just hasn't done it as long as Haynes has.
So now you can see the team really starting to come back out here. The wide receivers, you've got Landon Roldan, Zachariah Branch, who's just been, I mean, everything that you could have asked for and more for this Dawgs team. Let's continue the touches every single game for him, whether that's maybe in the run game or in the pass game. Jeff, for you, do you have any final piece of intelligence for Dawg fans before we give our final thoughts?
Yeah, one of those things that's just awesome about the future and the present of Georgia football is Gunner Stockton runs out to the tunnel. He daps up his team, his fellow quarterbacks, his fellow centers, and then leads them out onto the field right there, Kaylee. Let's make very clear here, you see Drew Bobo back as the starting center with Gunner Stockton. I believe him and Gunner basically walked for senior day last week because they came in with their entire class of guys that were walking as seniors. I expect, obviously, Gunner to return next season. Drew Bobo might have a decision to make whether he wants to still play with his longtime boy and longtime friend, or whether he wants to go to the NFL, because I think he is a third-round draft pick at the minimum at center. But, Kaylee, you know this has to feel good for Drew Bobo to have heard all the boos, everything about his father and the way he does his job, and then have a make-right season as the Georgia center, changing the narrative on how good of a play caller his dad was.
All right, so we got to get out of here in just a few minutes before they kick me off the field. My final thought on all of this is that I am very confident in Georgia today. If you would have asked me this a couple weeks ago, I probably would not have been that confident that Georgia was going to come out today and make a dominant win. But I think that Georgia has the talent advantage in almost every single category. I think that Kirby Smart is a better coach than Brent Key. And to be here in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, I think it does give Georgia the slight edge. They're just more familiar with it all around. I think Georgia's going to continue what we've seen in the year since 2000 and continue to dominate. That's my final thought. It's very simple, but I think that Georgia gets the win comfortably today. Jeff, for you.
Kaylee, this would not be a Georgia Tech game if you don't find somebody with a dry erase board after the game that says, "We run this state." That's what this game is all about.
All right, so with that, Dawg Nation, thank you so much for joining us here live from Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We've got kickoff coming up. Make sure to check out Brandon Adams on DawgNation postgame immediately following the game. With that, we'll give you a Go Dogs for Rivalry Week. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving, and we'll see you right after for DawgNation postgame.